So as a publisher, what we do is we figure out where does that person want to go, and then help them provide get them all the resources to get them a strong foundation, and then to lead them to where they want to go. Everybody's different, and there's no wrong way.
Welcome to a new episode of Most Memorable Journeys. Today I have a guest who I actually met in Clubhouse. It's not somebody that I've met in real life, but there are people in our lives that we come across and you just feel that they are on your wavelength. He is nice and he has these Clubhouse rooms, and when I enter the room, he invites me up on stage and he is just very nice. And I think at the beginning, it doesn't really matter what people do. For me, at least, it doesn't matter what they do. For me, the first thing that's important when I meet somebody is, are they nice or are they not nice? And then you find out what they are all about. Dominick Domasky, what do you think about what I just said? Do you agree with me?
I love what you are saying, and I hope to share that kind of example with my children as well, right? Like, if this person is nice, they treat you good. I don't care if they're a doctor, garbage man, landscaper, lawyer, make them your friend.
Yeah, I respect everybody who is nice to me. If people who are not, I tend to just ignore them because I don't like to go their way, So, Dominick, you are an inspirational author, storyteller, and founder of the inspiration sharing and publishing platform Motivation Champs. And you've written a few books, especially one of them has caught my attention, which is called My Name Is Sharon, and we'll talk about that later on. But since my podcast is called Most Memorable Journeys, so when was your last trip? Have you been traveling during COVID at all?
We did travel during COVID. Me and my lovely wife had hit 20 years of blissful marriage, and we went to Jamaica. And saw the blue waters of Jamaica and the jerk chicken. And there was a jerk chicken cart. Would you like to hear about the jerk chicken?
Yes, I would. I'd love to hear about that.
Okay. So at the resort, there is a gentleman that's famous in this area, a local celebrity. And he pushes around a cart with a little grill on it where he makes jerk chicken. And for about 5 hours a day, he pushes his cart around, and people from all the resorts that connect or are nearby follow him in a line. And he just puts jerk chicken on a little paper plate, chops the bones up and everything. You have to pick the bones out, and then that is the highlight of the trip.
The highlight of the trip was the jerk chicken.
Yeah.
And it was the 20 years wedding anniversary.
Mute this, rewind it, and don't ever share that with my wife. No.
I'm going to share it. There's not going to be anything muted or rewound. And I'm going to make sure that she hears it too. I am only joking, of course. But Jamaica is fun, isn't it? I have been many years ago, but it's a fun island and lots of gorgeous people.
Absolutely. Just everybody was so welcoming and poured the drinks heavy, and the beaches were perfect. The atmosphere was perfect. And it was just something really 20 years. I will say, just in this area after 9/11, my wife had somewhat became afraid to fly. So over the past few years, past 10 years or so, 5 years or so, we've really gotten back into exploring different parts of the country again, from LA to Florida to Texas, wherever.
Yeah. 9/11 was had a huge impact on everything and everyone, because I used to be a tour guide in the US, and I used to travel, on the what do you call it? Inland flights within the US. And I remember times when there was no security. You just walk through. That was before, obviously.
Right.
I remember taking the Trump shuttle from Washington to New York. And sometimes when I was there with my tour group a little early, because it went every hour, the Trump shuttle, then they just said, oh, come on, let's go. Let's take I was supposed to go on the 12 o'clock, and then they rushed us through to go to the 11 o'clock. And then, of course, everything changed. And that's a shame, all the liquid and all the stories. So traveling, and especially now with the masks and everything, traveling is less fun, but I'm hopeful.
Yes, hope. There's always hope, right?
Let's talk about hope. So you are very motivational. And whenever I speak to you, and we've been speaking quite a lot, I've been in your rooms quite a few times, you are always motivating other people, and you are always promoting other people, and you are always in a good mood. How do you do that?
I believe that, one, positivity is like a muscle, right? You build that muscle. Everybody that's listening, we are going to go through challenges and adversities and things like that. But there's this thought that right now, me, you, your listeners have survived 100% of the toughest days of their lives, right? So you've already been through these tough times. And I have this belief that as you go through them, adversity makes you stronger. Adversity makes you stronger. You use that, you develop empathy and tools, and surround yourself with positive people like yourself. And like you said earlier, I don't hang out with the negative people. And so I surround myself with positivity, and it is helpful. So I realize there are bad things in the world that happen. I don't pretend like there aren't bad things, but what I believe is you're strong enough and better days are ahead. And I keep studying and researching and surrounding myself with those kind of things. So, and it seems to enhance my belief.
Yeah, you're very right. I think this is the biggest secret to a happy life, to understand that you can never choose what happens, but you can always choose how you want to react. And actually, one of my favorite books, I don't know if you're familiar with it, it's Man's Search for Meaning by Dr. Viktor Frankl. He's a Holocaust survivor. And there is one quote in there. He says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And that space is where the power is, because whatever stimulates you, you can choose. Then you have this space in between, and then you can decide how you want to react. And what do you think about people who are always victims, who are always blaming somebody else? What do you have to say to that?
First, I have compassion for them, right? We were not all, there's a line in The Great Gatsby, and it basically goes, remember, son, we were not all afforded the same opportunity. So it is very easy, right, to judge and pick on these people and say, well, maybe they didn't have a supportive mom or dad. Maybe they had issues early on in their childhood. Maybe they had lost jobs, and we are not all equipped to handle the same things. So one, I wish, and I'd love to work with and hope that they could overcome that. And I don't love that, right? But I understand it. And I think, hey, maybe if they had the support. So anybody here, that's coming down on them. Well, what if we looked at things a different way? What if you can handle it? Yeah, that is good. Bad things are going to happen, right? You can handle it. Or, yeah, okay, now what, right? My friend Brian P. Swift, who you've met before, he often says, and now what? And now what? Right? So this happened, and now what? And I feel like we're too rough on them, right? So also, yeah, there's a lot of people that live in that world. We don't have to live in that world, and encourage them when you can. And also, for anybody who's being brought down by people like that, I would encourage you to avoid the energy vampires and bloodsuckers, right? These are people that it could be a beautiful day and they'll look at, but there's a cloud coming over there, but it's going to rain this afternoon. But what's going to happen tomorrow? And we can avoid them as much as we can, but also try to understand there's two sides to every pillow.
Yeah, I think you just taught me a little lesson here, because I'm not often so compassionate. Sometimes I get annoyed. But then on the other hand, I also don't agree that these people need us. You are the average of the 5 people that you surround yourself with. But then on the other hand, because I have had gift of managing to be positive and managing to overcome many things, I feel that it's my duty to look after people who are not so well or who are not. Of course, then at some point you get a little impatient and you think, come on, we've spent enough time together now. You should get it. But some people just don't, and they need us. I mean, we cannot just drop anybody just because they are not so happy. But I agree with you. We should stick to the happy ones.
And I just want to follow up on that because it's something I'm super passionate about. Like anybody that has the means, has the charisma, has the beauty, has the muscles, has the whatever to help somebody else, right? In my world, I believe you have a duty, right? Yeah, I'm always reminded of that story of the little boy picking up the starfish, right, on the beach, where he walks down the beach and there's hundreds of thousands of starfish there. And little boys walking, throwing one at a time back in the ocean. And then the man comes by the boy and says, "What are you doing?" And the boy says, "Throwing starfish back in the water." And the man says, "You can't save them all." But the little boy says, "Well, I saved that one." And right, hey, who knows? You might create that ripple effect, right? That 10 years from now, maybe that's the person that you helped, and it was their grandkid, it was their son, it was their daughter, it was them that made that change. Yeah,
so true. And I make this motivational post every day on social media, on my Instagram and on my Facebook. And sometimes I think, oh God, I'm tired of doing this. Nobody sees it, nobody appreciates it, blah blah. And then sometimes here where I live, I go to the supermarket and I meet somebody who I didn't even know that I'm friends with them on Facebook, and they come up to me and they say to me, I wait for your post every morning and it makes me feel good. And then I think, that's it. Even if I can just this one person and make this one person stay a little better, that's mission accomplished.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that one of my favorite things about being a publisher of books is when I hear a story from an author who sends me a text saying that they got that kind of response. I never met this person and they read my book and they said, right, and now that ripple effect here by helping somebody else share their story, they were able to impact everybody. Because I have this belief that inspiration for everybody is different. So what I do at my root is help everybody share their story, right? Because my story, where I'm from blue collar town of Pittsburgh, is different than somebody from Chicago, or I have authors from Dubai or the Netherlands and things like that. Their story is different, but it can still help somebody, and that story of women's empowerment, that story of somebody that overcame cancer, the story of somebody that grew up in the inner city and didn't have a father around and now inspires the community, right? These are all different stories that, hey, we can give them a platform. And so when I hear back from them that I shared my story and they were at the grocery store and they heard that, dang, I've created a ripple.
Yeah, that's true. And, you're saying that there's a different story when it coming out of Pittsburgh or coming out of whatever, Dubai but I also feel I was a tour guide for 11 years and I lived all over the world. And yes, there are different mentalities, there are different cultures, but I have learned one thing in all these years of traveling. We are all the same. We all have the same needs. We have the need for safety and we have the need for a little importance, and we want to be financially free. I think, that wherever you go to, I was recently in Jordan and I was talking to somebody who was selling souvenirs in Petra, and I was sitting with this lady having tea, and we ended up having a conversation about our kids and that we want them to be educated and it costs money. And then we were talking about cooking, and then we were talking about she had an Instagram account. So, at the end of the day, aren't we all the same?
No, absolutely. And you would what is that, Maslow's hierarchy, where you says, self-actualization, safety, those kind of things.
That goes through mankind. Dominick, I want to talk a little bit about My Name Is Sharon, about your book, because I also want to talk about how this works to publish a book. I'm sure there are people who are listening to us who will be interested in that. But you wrote this book called My Name Is Sharon, and Sharon is your mom, isn't it?
That is my mom. And when I wrote the book, my mom's had a battle with Alzheimer's for about 10 years now. As a publisher, I don't always write anymore because I'm busy promoting other people and I'm working with them. So me writing, I do it just as a cathartic thing. So, or working on screenplays or something different. But this was a concept where I started writing just because I had these emotions that I couldn't share. I wasn't talking about them, right? It was sometimes what I learned is that this Alzheimer's and dementia and the family struggling with it, they hide in the shadows, right? Because this isn't something that...
It's a taboo.
Right, yeah, I wasn't going to put my mom out, and I still don't put her out on this and let people point their finger at her and look at her in a certain light, right? Because they loved her. And so I wanted to share a story of a mother and son's love. My mom was always there for me, right? From little boy when I was gangly and talked with mush in my mouth and got beat up at school and had teeth that stuck out of my mouth. And my mom was always there for me, protecting me. As the roles reversed, I wanted to share her story and not as necessarily a victim, but all that she had been through, right? And her journey, right? This memorable journey. So I had this thought that love is never lost, and I wanted to share her journey.
I mean, that is so beautiful. I use a technique when something bothers me, when something is on my mind and it keeps going around in my mind, I journal and I write things down, and I kind of visualize that what's in my head is going through my arm, through the pen on the paper, so I can kind of empty my head. Was there a bit of psychology involved as well when you wrote this book? Was it a bit of journaling?
For me, I think that, to your point, getting it out on paper, on screen, even in my notes, that kind of thing, it was helpful. And the thing about the story was my mom's journey also collided with 2020. So her Alzheimer's at the lowest points collided with a pandemic on the rise. So as I was writing, I did not know how the story would end. And so that was kind of the process. So there was no ending because I didn't have it. And then when we were locked out, so for people in nursing homes and things like that, we were separated for some time with glass and screens and masks, and I had to take my little daughter to see her grandmother, and she was locked out by all those things where we could barely even see her through the screens and the glass and the things like that. So there were tough times, and the story chronicles from the moment I think she forgot the first thing to the collision with COVID.
Wow. This whole situation in 2020 has had there are so many stories. There are good stories as well. One of the good stories is my podcast. I never thought of starting a podcast, but because I love traveling and I used to travel, I was in Argentina. I got stuck at the beginning in Argentina. I actually traveled to Argentina on the 11th of March, which I shouldn't have done. I should have known, but never mind. That's another story. But when I couldn't travel anymore, I felt like I was missing a limb. So I just thought, if I can't travel, I'll talk about travel. And I started the podcast, and here we are. And, there are two sides to so many, many things. But I think especially for people like your mom who don't understand everything 100% anymore, this situation was heartbreaking and very difficult. And I think for somebody to watch like you or your family, even worse.
No, it's so just to think that, like, for work myself, I may have taken 50 COVID tests, right? Where the swabs and things like that. And to think that my mom, who doesn't understand, has to take a COVID test, or everybody's wearing masks around her, she's not allowed to go outside. And those watching that and seeing that and not being able, the guilt something so I was one of the people that she had a fall right before COVID and separated her hip, and it like cut like a jigsaw through the bone. So my parents lived in an old farmhouse, and she was going to no longer be able to to live there, right? To be alone in a farmhouse. There was no way, right? There's not even one floor. Even the flat floors have steps, right? Because it's all additions on additions. And so I was one of the people that pushed for getting there in a home. And then 3 months later, this pandemic hits and they say, you can't go, right? And so here, should I take her out? Should I fight more to get inside? Let me in. Well, that's just for me because she was safer there, right? Because now she's on vitamins and they're keeping the outside influences out, and the guilt as the months went by and over, it was me. And so should I have just taken her out and brought her to my house and figured it out? Well, that's not right because that's more about me than her.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah. And so it was a real mental conundrum on what was the right thing. And maybe there was no right answer, right? Everything I did was wrong, right? Except just like with my own children, I will say that I made any decision I made was out of love and with my mom's best interest in mind. From my own knowledge, from my own education, from what I was told by media sources or whatever, the research I could done, this is the decision we made. I have to live with that.
Yeah, but who knows what is right and what is wrong? Whoever knows what is right and what is anything. Yeah. But you were telling me something really beautiful before we started recording, and that was about you taking out your mom and your kids in the car to see the Christmas lights. And I think that is just beautiful.
Yes. And so it went about a year and a half where we weren't able to visit, right? And as I'm saying it, this pressure and this, why let us in, let us outside. So finally over the summer, we were able to visit outside, and we'd go and sit on the front benches or out in the back in a pavilion and had lovely visits, right? It was so rewarding. And they're not always rewarding when somebody's in that kind of condition, right? And my mom hasn't known my name for 6 years. She smiles when she looks at me, and I think every once in a while, you think when you walk, she even said, I miss you, right? Or lights up from time to time. And so not saying the name or not really knowing, or those times when you go and she doesn't wake up, right? Is everything all right? But so we're around Christmas time, and her brother is in from halfway across the country. It's the first time I've seen him in 2 years. He came in to visit. And the other day, the first thing she said is, that's my brother, Tommy. And so in a couple of, who this guy is? That's my brother, Tommy. And so the conversation was a little different, it didn't fade away as much. And when you ask direct questions, we decided, let's go and look at Christmas lights. And so the next day we scheduled to take her out of there. You need all elements to be correct because you can't be out too long. Sundowners happens at night, so you don't know, is it going to be worse? But I think with her brother there, with me there, if the car's out front, if they know we're coming, we might be able to pull this off. Now, meanwhile, my daughter's got basketball, my son's got basketball. We're picking my daughter up from the band. All these other things have to go right. On this day, for 40 minutes, she came out, smiled. She saw her brother, smiled a little more, mentioned Tommy. We loaded her there into the car, and we drove around, and we looked at houses with Christmas lights. And she said, that's green. What are those? That's Christmas lights. That's a stop sign, or that's a green light. You go. What do I do here, Mom? That's a red light. You stop. And we saw more Christmas lights. And at one point, even on the way back, and this is not a lie, on the way back, we're driving and there's a car wash, there's a hill, and she's trying to make out that the trees, and she's really not saying the correct terminology. And she says, Richard, and that's my dad's name. She wants to get my attention. And then she said, Dominick. So 6 years, she says my name, and we have this perfect half hour. So my kids, for the first time in 5 years, get to see their grandma as their grandma for the first time. There's nothing negative about the experience, and it went off as good as it could be. So I just have this belief that there's always hope, right? And you never know. Maybe it's a minute. Maybe it's 1 minute, that moment in time, but hell, it's worth it.
And you see, that is a very, very memorable journey. And the memorable journey can be looking at Christmas lights in the car. It doesn't have to be a trip around the world. That's what I also meant when I started my podcast. Most memorable journeys is not just about traveling. It's about journeys in life. And that story that you were just saying, which was half an hour or maybe a little more, that's a beautiful journey.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think for me personally, I won't ever forget it. And hopefully that's what my daughter remembers and my son remembers about their grandma, not those other times.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about book publishing. How does that work?
Well, so number one, I believe that just like everybody has a journey, this is interesting because it's so intertwined. Everybody has a story to tell. And what we try to do is bring that story out of them, but also realize that when somebody tells their story or book publishing, if somebody wants to share that story, not everybody wants to share that story with everybody, right? So some people might write a book to give to their grandkids. Some people might write a book just to keep close to their heart, like we said, journaling, but they want this to have all their thoughts in one place. Some people might write a book because they're a famous podcaster like yourself, and they realize that, hey, these stories, I need to tell them in more ways. And so as a publisher, what we do is we figure out where does that person want to go, and then help them provide get them all the resources to get them a strong foundation, and then to lead them to where they want to go. Everybody's different, and there's no wrong way. If this is where you want to go, okay, that's fine. If this is where you want to go, but really getting into the science of, okay, if this is where you want to go, you might not be able to do it on your own or one at a time, or if you put out a book that is substandard quality, or if you don't have a marketing plan around it, if you're not out promoting it. And so we really dig into that. And this is a subject that I'm super passionate about, but it really comes down to, I believe I have a story to share. And now, inch by inch, developing and telling that story.
So whoever is listening to us here, if you have a story to tell, Dominick Domasky is your man. Get in touch with him. We're going to put all your details and everything in the show notes so people can find you. I've got a book. I think I have to send you my book.
Bring it on.
I will. It's called The Soul Kit, First Aid for the Soul. I used to work as an interpreter for the European Police Association, and I used to spend so much time on planes and at airports. And that's when I wrote. And I actually wrote my book on a plane mostly and in airport. It's a small book. Anyway, that's a different story. I'll send you one. Let's talk a little bit about travel, because we're already, you're the kind of guy that I could talk to for 3 hours and not notice the time has passed. But I always ask people that tonight somebody told you can go on a trip. Anywhere you want. You can take your kids and your wife with you. Where would you go?
Okay, I'm almost going to separate this. So one, I would go to Rome and the Colosseum with my wife. I've seen this, and I'm thinking you've probably been to Rome 10 times. But I'm so fascinated with, one, I believe history repeats itself. So, whether it's studying Lincoln or laws or anything like constitutions, wars, I'm such a believer that you learn from the past. But I would love to see Rome. I would love to see Italy. I'd go down there. I'd get myself in a little gondola and I'd love to see it all. So we are working. I'm thinking if I can get my daughter good enough grades, she's about 12 years old. Me and my wife have this plan. Once we have our children are off at college, the day we drop my daughter off, we're getting in that plane and heading overseas.
Well, if you go to Rome, then you might as well take another plane once you're done with Italy. And it's another 2 hours to Cyprus, because the Eastern Mediterranean is worth visiting. I am far down in the Eastern Mediterranean. I'm 20 minutes away from Beirut and 40 minutes away from Tel Aviv and 40 minutes from Cairo. So that's also a part to consider. It's an interesting part of the world. But I agree with you, Italy, because I'm originally from Switzerland and Italy is my neighbor. And when I was living in Switzerland still, we used to go for the weekend, just by car to the north of Italy, to the Piedmont or to Tuscany and it's just beautiful. I think I always say Italian men are the only men who still flirt with women my age.
So it's a perfect place to be then, right?
Absolutely. Right. So we're far in already. Anything else that you would like to tell people? Any inspirational moments, inspirational tips?
Sure. And so we started talking about people having a story to share. So focused on this concept right now of there being 7.6 billion people on the planet. And there only being one Elizabeth, one Dominick, right? And so to anybody listening, if you try to be anybody else, right? If I try to be somebody else, I will fail miserably, right? But if I try to be Dominick, I can do all right at it. I can be the best Dominick I can be. I will not be good at being anybody else. So for your listener out there, be you, be your authentic self. You have a story to share. It's unique. It's original. Your story, you can make a difference. So by being yourself, by following your journey, I really think that you could, do amazing things. And if you share that journey, I think that you could really help other people as well. There's people that are looking up to you. There's people that are going to face the struggles that you've already overcome. And by sharing your story, you may help them. And that's what I'd like to leave you with.
Yeah, I heard it somewhere, and I didn't invent it, but somebody said that your story may be somebody else's survival guide.
Wow.
And that's powerful, isn't it? Don't quote me. It's not from me. Somebody said it and it made an impression on me. And I think that's a good thing to end this interview with.
Thank you.
Dominick, it was an absolute pleasure to have you. And I want to thank you very, very much. And I hope that one day we'll meet in real life and not just on Clubhouse.
Absolutely. I know now that I know Cyprus is 2 hours from Rome, it's going to happen.
Yes. So, hopefully things will change. I recorded a podcast episode not long ago when I went to Jordan, and I started it by saying, we had to do a PCR test. And I kind of said, I wonder if in 5 years, people who listen to this podcast will know what a PCR test is. Hopefully not.
Absolutely, right?
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you enjoy my podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. You will find all the information in the show notes. If you like what you hear and want to know more, check out my Soul Guru Lifestyle Program on my website, www.thesoulguru.com. Forget this.